and this is a report around the force's position into relation the use of force, and specifically including firearms in this case. So this is looking at a number of areas, but obviously in terms of the work and some of the funding that has been provided around body-worn videos, for example, and introduction of bite and spit guards. These are all things put in place and able to assist officers carry out their roles. And there's also been a campaign that you'll be aware of called Protect the Protectors, which I've got involved with as well, working with some of our local MPs around how police officers can be protected in the exercise of their duties. So with that introduction, I'll hand over for an update.
Yeah, so it's a timely request for the report, as we've changed our processes along with the Home Office requirements for the use of force reporting. The Head of Operations is here, Mr Kingsman.
Thank you, Mr Robbins. So from the 1st of April this year, we've commenced the recording of use of force on a new form for the Home Office, and the first annual return will obviously therefore being the 31st of March next year, where we'll be able to present 12 months of data to the Home Office and recommended practices for us to release locally details of quarterly data. That was last done in August, and there'll be a subsequent quarter two to come out shortly. The officers and staff are required to submit the reports via a use of force app, which is available on your mobile device, or you can do it on a desktop if you're old-fashioned via the Pronto Manager. Officers are required to submit the reports in a number of circumstances, and I'll just run through those briefly. Tactical communications, that includes the officer just physically being there, or their communication skills to try and resolve the incident. The use of handcuffing, both compliantly and non-compliantly. Baton, strikes, or just drawing the baton. The use, drawing and aftercare in relation to powder spray, the irritant spray that officers carry. You mentioned in your introduction, Commissioner, the introduction of spit and bite guards that are now used both inside of custody and out of the custody setting. The use of, to call it its proper name, conducted energy device, or taser as most people commonly know it, and that we look at and whether that's just simply being drawn, aimed, the use of the red dot, arced, fired, or a drive stun. And then at the most serious end of the spectrum, the use of firearms, both whether they've been aimed or fired by the police. In terms of numbers, there have been 7,984 use of force reports submitted in the 6 months up to the end of September 2017. On those, officers have to record all of the tactical options that they use, so that there can be a number for each incident. And just to break that down a bit for you, tactical communications was recorded as the as the first tactic and effective on 4,814 occasions, which I'm pleased with, which shows that officers are using that most effectively as they should be doing. The most important skill is communication. Compliant handcuffing then was the next highest effective first tactics. That was 2,148, and obviously therefore second behind tactical communication. And then that then led into 1,009 occasions when non-compliant handcuffing was recorded, and that was an effective second tactic. And again, that shows that we're talking to people and trying other methods before going straight to non-compliant handcuffing. Baton, which is quite a significant use of force, is only being recorded as the effective first tactic on 16 occasions out of nearly 8,000, and it's actually only been used striking on 2 of those occasions as well. So again, a limited use of baton, which is what I want to see. Spitting and bite guards have been used on 36 occasions. 15 of those were in custody, and 21 of those now outside the custody area. And on 2 occasions it was recorded as being the effective first tactic, and then it's ended up being a third tactic on 14 occasions. Again, demonstrates that people are trying to use other tactics before going straight to the car. Parva irritant spray was was drawn on 182 occasions and then sprayed on 326 occasions. Sounds a lot, but again, it's shown as being used as a second tactic on 90 occasions and the third tactic on 129 occasions, which again shows people trying other things first. And finally then, in the non-firearms world, taser was recorded as being used on 168 occasions. Non-firing wise, that's 129, so that's simply drawing it and showing people its presence. It was only used 39 occasions where we fired it. We look very carefully at that data, and the use is proportionate to what we've seen in previous years, so we haven't seen a rise in the use of taser, and every taser discharge is reviewed by a Chief Inspector Firearms Commander on the CARDA, and that still occurs. And finally, firearms, there are 330 armed deployments which have involved a variety of tactics in the 6 months. I suppose the important thing is on 95 of those we've actually aimed firearms at subjects prior to them being arrested, and there have been no police discharges of firearms in that period. And that's sort of a summary of the report.
Thank you. Yeah, very interesting with regards to the figures, and I do have a few follow-up questions on this one. So, as you've said in the reports, there were 7,984 use of force reports submitted by officers and staff it is a 6-month period, isn't it? Yeah. For context, can you tell us what proportion of incidents attended in this time resulted in a use of force not including tactical communications?
Yeah, there were over 190,000 incidents physically attended by officers in that 6-month period. So thankfully somebody else has done the maths for me. but that means that 4.5% of all the incidents resulted in a use of force report being submitted. And if we break that down further, 383 there were only tactical communications used. So actually in 7,600 cases other force was used out of that 193,000. We probably think there's a slight under-recording still, if I'm being honest. If you look at the force tends to see around 4,000 arrests a month, we would think that should therefore lead to probably 4,000 use of force reports. So we're going to take that, Mr Battle's taking that to the COP to address by district commanders, and it is about continuing to push the recording and the use of the force for.
Yeah, so thanks for that. So that equates about 4% then?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And out of those, what proportion of use of force incidents result in a complaint being made? And do you know what proportion of those are then upheld?
There were 106 allegations of assault from those use of force, which again somebody else has done the maths for me, but that's 1.3% out of 7,894. 7,984, sorry. Of those, 3 of those complaints were disapplied, 2 were locally resolved, 24 investigated and not upheld, and 8 were withdrawn, and 69 therefore are still live sub judice here in the appeal period.
And sorry, was that over a 6 month?
Yeah, that's over that same period of April to September 17. Right. So obviously a number of those complaints will still be ongoing. Okay.
So none upheld yet then?
None upheld at this moment in time.
But still a relatively small 1.24%, was it?
1.3.
1.3.
You might be more accurate than me.
Okay.
Yeah, 1.3.
Right. Okay. Right. Well, that's interesting to know. Thanks for that. As you said, Spite and Bit cards have recently been rolled out to. Am I right in saying all frontline officers?
They are being so, but
Yeah.
it's not yet complete to everybody.
But what proportion would you say overall currently?
We think that there's, well, I'll give you the exact number, 1,255 had been trained to the 11th of this month, so that's the most up-to-date figure I've got, which is about 45% of the front line, so we're nearly halfway.
Right.
But yeah, there's still a proportion of officers to get it yet.
Okay. Has there been any sort of post-implementation carried out yet, or is it too early?
I think it's too early to say, as we've not yet got everybody trained. The anecdotal feedback from frontline officers is they're really pleased that they're getting this protection and see it as a positive move by the force. We've certainly not had any adverse feedback.
Certainly, it was an interesting to note that certainly when you look at baton, the baton's been drawn only on 16 occasions, and spit and bite guards recorded on a total of 36 occasions.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a stark contrast, isn't it? So one of the questions, therefore, is around the baton as a piece of equipment. Is it becoming less
I think
relevant?
Yes, the baton is a piece of personal protective equipment, as you recall, replaced the truncheon, and was the primary piece of protective equipment for officers out on patrol prior to the introduction of taser. Now, through the sort of assessment of threat and risk, we deploy taser cars and officers to what would describe to be violent offenders. And taser actually comes, above, in the use of force continuum, comes above the use of a baton, because the baton, on any part of the body, let alone what we'd describe as the red area, is a very intrusive and serious piece of equipment for probably the higher end of self-defence when an officer is under attack. The use of tactical communications, taser and parva spray if required, are far more preferred by officers and in the use of force continuum. So I think the use of spit and bite guards is, again, slightly different around officer protection from an assault through being spat at into the mouth or into the eyes. And again, the point I was going to make on that, they are reviewed by chief inspectors on every deployment, going through a whole process, just as we do with other use of force equipment, because we understand the potential perception from communities and individuals about their use, and we want to make sure proportionality and necessity is there. But I think we will all agree that the use of baton in such low numbers is a good thing in terms of the force.
I wouldn't call it yet obsolete. There have been occasions, most notably in the London Bridge, where the officer used his baton, taking on the terrorists, and there is a scenario where you're faced with more than one individual where a baton is probably your only option. So I wouldn't call it obsolete, but I'm really pleased that we're seeing the other use of other protective equipment first.
Okay. I did mention the Protect the Protectors campaign, which started earlier this year, and obviously something I have supported along with MPs, particularly Holly Lynch in Halifax. Do you think this has had any sort of visible impact on the number of assaults since its inception?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with the chairman of the Federation and with the other associations and unions around the police's response to that element. I think it's still work in progress. There was work that we needed to do in-house around investigation, culture and approach to say that actually it isn't just part of the job being assaulted at work. So we've worked on that. We've worked with the judiciary around sentencing and with the Crown Prosecution Service around their prosecution thresholds, and again enforcing that we have the rights and entitlements of all other members of the public. Just because we're on duty, our staff don't deserve to be assaulted. So I think the long-term reduction in the propensity for people to assault us, we'll have to wait and see But that's where we're genuinely grateful for the support of politicians and other groups who are coming in to help the voice of the frontline officers to get that communication message out to the public. But sadly, we work in an environment where we are the ones asked to step forward into violent situations, and people who are in difficult personal circumstances or aggressive through drunk and alcohol. So we can do all we can about the provision of kit, but we are very grateful for the support that people have been providing on our behalf.
Yeah. Okay, well thanks for that, and I'm sure that'll be an ongoing campaign and support for police officers and emergency workers in general. You've mentioned about reviews being undertaken following use of force. Can you just sort of expand a bit on what support is offered to officers and staff following such incidents?
Yeah, so there's a 8-point plan which West Yorkshire Police have developed alongside the Federation and the unions to make sure that the line management of an assaulted officer or staff member is made aware at the first opportunity about what's gone on, that the Federation or union representative are made aware, and that the in appropriate circumstances the occupational health are made aware. In the more serious circumstances, we work with obviously physical and psychological treatment programs around the effects upon the officers, and we also work with the sort of trauma care needed, both short-term and long-term, for the emotional effects on staff, support them through obviously the NHS and the normal treatment programs, or work in partnerships with police charities such as the Police Treatment Centre to get them back to work and back mentally and physically fit as soon as we possibly can, both for the operational requirement of protecting the public, but also for their own health and well-being and the benefit of them and their families. So we're quite proud of all that we've done to wrap around officers, but in the current financial situation it's challenging and difficult, but we've tried to put it at the forefront. I don't think there's anything else to add to that, but again it's still part of that work from the Federation and others going forward to see what else we can do.
Yeah, okay. I mean that support is important, and to review, where it's required. Just finally from me, just to go back to you mentioned, Tim, about that you would accept there is an under-reporting given the number of incidents overall. We talked about the app now being available on handheld devices, and yes, on desktop still. Do you see that increasing then in terms of what's available with regards to technology and the ease of access, or are there still issues with some of the technology and how this gets downloaded, etc.?
No, I think this is more about officer behaviour than technology. The technology is available for people to do it. This is about us encouraging the debrief and it being part of the process after an incident where we make sure that happens. So I do see that we will get to where we want to be, but it's not technology holding us back. It's a form, and officers don't always like filling in forms, do they? This is about encouraging them to, and so we can take the learning from that form.
I think, to be fair to Tim, the Home Office have now put a requirement in that there should be a national annual data return around all use of force. So I think in terms of the underreporting on all custody records, whether or not there's been force used is recorded on the custody record. What we've now got is another process on top of that we need to educate and get the staff to understand. So in terms of the care and welfare of the individual, any use of force is recorded in all 4,000 of those. I'm really confident with that. But now we've got this other piece of data return that means we need to take that off and ensure it's on another form as well, and it's that bit of under. So it's reported in the right area, but it's underreported at the moment in this new process of the national data return, which is what we'll work on.
But sorry, so the underlying point though, but in terms of accessibility on the handheld devices, that isn't causing an issue. That's
no.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Jim. Yeah.
Tim, can I just ask about the definition, because it is a wide definition, isn't it? And including tactical communications does really increase the volume of returns that are required, and it will perhaps for some officers be seen as a bureaucracy. Can you just tell us what effort is going into that cultural change to get officers to be prepared to routinely provide this data?
Yeah, as the officer goes through their officer safety training, they have to do that every year. So this is now part of their officer safety training as well, about the use of it, and then also encouraging officers on debriefs when they're discussing what they've been through. Again, it's about reinforcing the message. Richard Corkwell, as the head of public order training, he's put out a message about it as well, the use of force. And again, we're trying to push that this is about helping the officer and learning from the incident, and then that will feed into the right equipment, the right numbers, and using it in that sense rather than, you must always.
Okay, thanks for that report. Really interesting in terms of the figures. And as you say, we'll have an annual picture by March of next year, when that return needs to be sent to the Home Office, and we look forward to analysing it further at that point. So thank you for that update.